Hi Nutboard Gamers and welcome back to this Nutboard Gaming bite-sized episode. I'm your host, I'm Mark. Now in today's video we're going to be looking at a game which originally came to Kickstarter in 2018, and at that point it was known as SSO, Spaceship Amiga, by Manakent Games. Now it's coming back to Kickstarter, I think in September this year, as a slightly upgraded and deluxeified version with additional components and some additional challenges in there. Bear in mind this is a prototype copy, so this is a copy that was sent to me by Manakent Games, so none of these components are actually final as of yet, and when it comes back to Kickstarter it's going to be known as SSO, Spaceship Amiga, the Rage of Montalbano. Yes, that's right. It's getting this bigger, better upgrade when it relaunches on Kickstarter in September this year. Hi everybody, look, I'm just in the process of editing the video and I realise that all the way through the game I refer to the game as the Rage of Montalbano. I could not get Ricardo Montalban from Fantasy Island out of my head for some reason. The game is actually called SSO, the Rage of Montalbano. So there's an O on the end of it. Apologies to Manakent Games for continually making this error. So the game is designed for 1 to 6 players. That's either solo, cooperative or semi-cooperative. There is a mild variation you can do to make a slight competitive edge on it. Obviously today we're going to be looking at the solo game. So what is exactly SSO Spaceship Amiga? In SSO, the Rage of Montalbano, you as a solo player are going to be taking the role of 6 crew members. That's right, 6 crew members with a further 1 in hypersleep. And what is the purpose of the game? Well, if you're at all familiar with some of the classic sci-fi films of the 70s and 80s, so I'm talking things like Silent Running, Alien, but without the alien, but also, you know, kind of the ship, what happens on the ship there. Maybe even things like the black hole. You're familiar with this crew being out in deep space and something bad is happening, and that's exactly what happens in SSO, the Rage of Montalbano. Wearing its kind of 70s sci-fi influences heavily on its sleeve, and not in a bad way. As you can see from the style on some of the cards, you have this kind of CRT monitor here. The story in SSO Rage of Montalbano is kind of open-ended, and I'll come on to why it's open-ended, but let me just read to you exactly how the kind of premise of the game. Something terrible has happened to the SS Amiga, humanity's last best hope. You are the rescue team sent to recover the ship and save the mission. The terrible thing that happened is still ongoing though, and will be happening to your crew also. This is represented by the challenge deck. If at least one player has at least 1 surviving crew member when the challenge deck is empty, then that player has outlasted the disaster and can safely complete the Amiga's mission. Yes, so as you can see, it's open-ended because it's kind of a modular game. You can add different challenge decks in there, so it's not too prescriptive because the challenges are different depending on which challenge deck you get. And that is the core function of the game. So here you can see the game laid out, and as you can see it's a card-based game. Now one of the upgrades that they're providing in the Rage of Montalbano that wasn't in the original SSO are these dials here, and these dials are going to track your oxygen and your morale, and we'll come on to how that works in a bit. But I mentioned the challenge deck, and this here, the red back cards, are effectively the timer for the game. This is your challenge deck. If you successfully go through each of the 24 cards that's in that challenge deck and you completed all of them, or you got past all of them, and you still have a surviving crew member, then you have won the game. That sounds simple, but oh no, the game throws up a really significant challenge. You see, 24 challenge cards sounds like it's going to be a long game. And don't get me wrong, you know, you can play a game in around about an hour and a half, depending on what decision space you make. But the beauty about this challenge deck is, first of all, it's modular, as I mentioned, and therefore you can get different challenge decks to actually play with. But you don't only go through it by just turning a challenge up each and every phase. There are ways that will allow you to absolutely burn through that challenge deck a little bit faster and give you a bit more of a fighting chance. And you're going to need that fighting chance because, like a lot of threat management games, and more so when you're dealing with, or when you're handling a fairly large number of crew as it is in this case, then kind of death and sacrifice become key parts of helping you beat the game. And you're going to need every ounce of luck, of skill and of planning that you've got, because this is one rock hard game to beat. But I'm getting slightly ahead of myself. So let's talk about how you play the game of SSO, the Rage of Montalbano. Now, as you can see from the picture, the spaceship setup is exactly the same every time for your starting game. And the tile that's directly on the left-hand side of this picture, which is the shuttle array, is a new addition to the Rage of Montalbano. There are certain array cards that are in the challenge deck that will come onto the player board as you go through that challenge deck. Now, the game consists of a number of rounds, and in each round there are at least 3 phases, and within those phases there are a number of steps. So the turns, each turn consists of an activation phase, a check phase, and a challenge phase. And that doesn't sound too bad, but there are a number of steps in each of these phases. So for example, the activation phase has 3 steps in there. The check phase has 6 steps, and the challenge phase has a further 10 steps on there as well, and then there's a death phase as well for when your character dies. But let's talk about the activation phase, what drives the game forward. So as you can see from the layout here, this is your spaceship, and your aim is to complete these challenges and these missions over here as you play the game, keeping as many of your crew alive as possible, at least trying to get at least one of your crew to stay until the end of the game. You see, you're going to move around this spaceship to various rooms, and these rooms all have different abilities and different powers on there, depending on which tile you're on. So, for example, one of the rooms allows you to put oxygen into your personal supply and take it from the ship's general oxygen. The other one allows you to increase your morale. Now, oxygen and morale are really, really important. If there's no oxygen, people die. And if morale is so low that you have a meeple that's on their own in a particular room and they have 0 morale, then they give up the ghost and they die. And it's really, really easy to try to actually die in this game as well. So whilst you're doing this and you're working through the challenge deck, what else is going to happen is certain things are going to happen which are going to flip rooms over. And what happens when a room flips over is that if any meeples that you have on there and that room flips over, guess what? They die. And that is a real kicker in this game. So when we talk about the activation phase, what happens? Well, fortunately, all of the cards are colour-coded. So the red is the challenge deck, the green back cards are your crew cards, and these blue back cards are your activation cards, and there are 12 in this deck, I believe. And what you will do is you will deal in the number of activation cards is equal to your alive number of crew members plus 1, and then you will distribute them to your crew members. And these cards give certain actions. So, for example, this one here says must move to main airlock. So if I was going to move the purple meeple, it says here must move to main airlock and gain 1 personal oxygen. So I would take my purple meeple, I'd move it to the main airlock and maybe gain 1 personal oxygen and lose some general oxygen. Or maybe here we got must move to any adjacent location. Now this one says must move to any non-array location, and this one says must move to any module, may flip 1 challenge card face up. And that's good because that allows you to burn through these challenge deck, and that's the aim of the game there. And what you'll do is you'll do that, you'll distribute your guys, and that's the kind of activation phase done. Then we're going to move into the next phase. And the next phase is the check phase, and this is where you will check kind of all automatic effects. So some of the rooms have automatic effects, some of the cards have automatic effects, and they would happen each and every turn. You'll also check the crew's morale. If they're 0 and it's on their own, then your crew member would die. You're going to reduce the oxygen supplies as well, so it's really vitally important that you control and maximise your oxygen. Then you can perform some crew actions, and these actions are on the cards, and they're different for each and every room and grant you a unique ability in that room. Then you'll check whether you've passed any missions. If you've unearthed missions, you've checked whether you passed or failed those missions, and that's the check phase done. So the kind of activation and check phase are all about kind of a little bit of housekeeping, but also mitigating, moving your meeples around the board to try and maximise their positions and mitigate any action that could happen in the challenge phase, because the challenge is the real meat and potatoes of the game. Now, the first thing you're going to do in the challenge phase is check whether any rooms are attached to these arrays. So the arrays are these rooms here, and this is an array here. If there's any one of these that's a pod and its array has been flipped over, what you're also going to do at this point is flip that room over. Doesn't sound bad, but of course you lose the ability to use the powers in that room, and if there were any meeples on there or any of your crew members on there when that room flipped over, they would die. Death comes easy in this game. It's, you know, there are ways that you can absolutely flip these back over though, and that will help you kind of reboot that room and hopefully mitigate against that. Then you're going to move your mission guides down by 1. You see, part of the game in the challenge deck on certain challenge cards is it's going to allow you access to missions which you vote on as to whether you want to take or not. So let's have a look at this mission here. This says here that we must have a crew in every solar array, so minimum 1 crew in every solar array. If we beat this within the 4 turns, then we may flip 2 challenge cards. Again, the missions allow you to burn through this deck quite quickly. If not at this stage, you just move the mission guide down 1. So as you can see on this, it starts with 4. And each turn it will go down, and when it goes down to 0, it's a fail, and the punishment is you have to flip a solar array. Then we've done that. If you've gone through all the challenge cards, then you've won. If all your crew cards are turned down and you've killed everybody, then you've lost at that point. Then you're going to flip a new challenge card. So as I say, these are the challenges that happen throughout the game. Now the ones here, these are new to the Rage of Montalbano, and what these do is these add new arrays which potentially you'll put on the ship or move around the ship, and then your more traditional challenge cards are here. So this is something you have to do, you know, for this time on this particular challenge, and each card presents a new challenge. So, search and report, try to move a rank token on its crew card to another crew's card and activates missions 1 and 3. So you've got to move your rank tokens, which is a way that you kind of, you can backstab people or use them for voting, etc. And these are specific challenges that will last now. I have to activate that challenge and then move forward. Then you will vote on missions, so you can say whether you want to actually do a mission or not. And then you will return to the activation phase and it all starts again. I'm kind of oversimplifying things there, and I kind of ran through the stages. There's obviously a lot of nuance there that I've not spoken about. It's about the challenges that come out. It's about how you handle those challenges. It's about placing your crew members on these various tiles around the board, because where you place them and the rooms that are available are absolutely key to ensuring your continued survival in this game. And I think that's where Glenn and Jen, who designed the game, and Manor Kent Games have really hit onto something kind of pretty good in this game, to tell you the truth, because once you get into this flow of the game, all those various steps in each of the phases all kind of blur into a natural flow on here. You don't find yourself becoming too tripped up by trying to remember the various stages, but there becomes this real kind of moral dilemma that starts to happen. And that's what I really like about this, is that you start to then juggle as to whether, you know, you want to sacrifice a crew member to save other crew members. Am I putting this person here to achieve this particular mission so I can get more oxygen, but I know after that that person is going to die? And each of the crew members has their own kind of unique abilities that maybe happen once a game or once per turn, etc. And you start to feel emotionally connected to them as the morale starts to dip in some of the crew members. So when people die, morale dips down. There's ways to increase morale, but if you don't do it on certain crew members, they start to feel forlorn and alone, and then eventually, if there's no morale and they're on their own, they give up the ghost and they commit suicide, and it's a really, really tragic thing to happen. However, you know, not all is well within the state of Denmark, and of course, on a game like this, from a relatively small publisher that hasn't gone through potentially loads of playtesting, you're going to hit certain things that maybe would have been ironed out in a larger release. First of all, there's the artwork. I personally like the artwork. I like the lo-fi effect of the artwork, but I know that some people aren't too keen on the fact that, you know, these things just like computer monitors, etc. And yeah, it doesn't really work for a lot of people. Also, if we look at the rooms themselves, now the spaceship has to be laid out in a very, very particular way each and every time that you lay it out. But each of these cards, you know, they look a little bit similar, and unless you've played the game a lot, you're going to have to refer back to the rulebook each and every time to kind of lay the game out, which is a bit of a shame. I think there could have been a bit more effort in trying to create a unique kind of way that you lay the ship out. On the artwork as well, on each of these cards, and let's just pick some of them as well. There's a lot of information on some of these cards, and some of it reads a bit like an A-levels maths question. You know, for example, on this one, it's a crew action, says crew oxygen plus Y, general oxygen minus Y times 2. Makes sense. ish when you know how to play the game, but when you're coming up with kind of coming across them on the first time through, it feels like you're trying to crack a little bit of a maths code, and it should be more icon driven than text driven, I believe. And another potential problem with the artwork is on the crew cards themselves. Now, as you can see, they're relatively perfunctory. You've got the kind of individual actions that they take there, and there's the engineer and a little blue icon. There's no personality to them. So whilst the game is very good at creating this emotional link to your players as their morale starts to dip and their oxygen starts to run out, it would be nice to see these cards have a bit more of a personality on them, just to create some kind of visual connection with them. As it stands at the moment, it all just feels a little bit detached. So just before we talk about the rulebook, I do want to say I have been in touch with Jen from Manor Kent Games and spoken about my problems with the rulebook, and I know that they are doing everything that they can to try and create a good rules experience. At the moment, the rulebook is... It's not broken that it kind of, it teaches you to play the game wrong. It's a little bit broken, and it just makes it very difficult to learn to play the game from the rulebook. You see, the original rulebook that came with SSO is this rulebook here, this little pamphlet, and it's some kind of 15 pages long. And right on the very first page, you have a lovely, nice diagram which tells you how to set the game out. However, this rulebook received a little bit of flack. You see, there's the flow in the rulebook is not necessarily intuitive if you've never played the game before, and it got people a little bit confused in how to play the game. The other thing as well was that most of the text, excuse me, most of the text is either white or green or yellow or red on black, and that plays havoc with a lot of people trying to read that text. I certainly, with being nearly 50 and with failing eyesight, I find it increasingly difficult to read books like this because it just strains my eyes a little bit. Fair play to Manor Kent. They listened to everybody, and they knew that the rulebook was a major stumbling point. So they have provided an upgraded rule sets for SSO, the Rage of Montalbano, and there's a PDF online at the moment. Now, it is still a work in progress because I think this is potentially where we swing the pendulum from one extreme to the other. You see, the new rulebook, where the first one was 15 pages long, the new rulebook is some 47 pages long. Now, a game like this does not need 47 pages of rules. Some of the icons that are in this rulebook, and as I say, it is work in progress, are really, really small. So you can see how to lay the room map tiles out there, but unfortunately a lot of these look very, very similar. So you can't really tell on there, so it takes a little bit of working out to know what goes where. Same with some of the examples as well. I can see what they're trying to do in here, but they don't really make a great deal of sense sometimes. So I started to hit a real problem with this rulebook. In fact, had it been for just reading the rulebook, I don't think I would have been able to learn to play the game, and that's a real shame, because once I did learn to play the game, there was just, this really solid solo experience behind it. It's a real shame about this rulebook because at 48 pages long, which is 3 times longer than the original rulebook, it swung the pendulum so far the other way that it's created this whole complexity where there does not need to be complexity. At its heart, this game is a simple move and threat management game. The rulebook maybe should be no longer than 10 pages at most, so 5 double-sided pages. To have 47 pages is just overkill. And the rules, because they're trying to, I think what's happening is Manor Kent Games has learnt from the original rulebook not potentially telling people enough of the right information, to the new rulebook being too over descriptive. So it even tells you, what they mean by ascending or descending ranking numbers, and I think we can work that out for ourselves. So that's a real shame. Had it been purely for this rulebook, I don't think I would have been able to play the game. However, on the upcoming Kickstarter page, preview page, and if you go onto YouTube and look for Geek City USA, there is a solo playthrough by Geek City USA, and I watched that video, and as soon as I watched that video, you don't have to watch it all, maybe the first 10 or 15 minutes, that completely opened up the game for me, and that's how I learned to play the game. I'd read the rulebook twice, couldn't really fathom out what to do or how I was doing it. Watched the video from Geek City USA, and that's it. That's when it clicked. So I think that's a real kind of important thing here, is that the rulebook is not perfect by a long stretch at the moment. However, Kudos to Mannequin Games. They're looking for feedback on this rulebook. The files are online. So if you want to help them kind of get this rulebook into as good a shape as possible for the launch of the game, have a look at the files online and see if you can put forward any suggestions. Because once you get past that, and if you watch the Geek City USA video, the game itself is a really, really solid solo experience. So, final thoughts on SSO, the Rage of Montalbano by Mannequin Games. Look, I think it's fair to say that not all great games come from big publishers. And while this isn't not quite a great game yet, I think from a relatively small publisher who do most of their own stuff in-house, don't have access to lots of external playtesting and kind of focus groups, etc., what Mannequin Games have created here has the potential to be something really, really kind of very, very interesting. It has the potential, once you get past that rule set and you can get past the quirks that happen and some of the mild mitigations that you have to put in place in terms of the difficulty level and the luck based in there, it creates a bloody good tension-filled gaming experience that once you learn to play it, can play in about an hour or so's time. It's a small box game. It's not going to be an expensive game, but you get the potential there, and there are expansion packs, the original SSO. So here we have one here, which is First Captain, which adds new challenge decks to it. So you get the potential for this modular expansion in there as well, and you can see this world absolutely starting to grow if the game is successful. Now, whether it will be successful or not will obviously come down to the next Kickstarter that launches, and I really hope that Mannequin can potentially do something else with this rule book, because at the moment that is the major kind of stumbling block for this game. If you can get past that and provide a nice flow, maybe an introductory game in there, or at least a couple of introductory rounds with nice clear kind of icons and a logical way of playing the game, then you'll open this game up to so many more people. So for me, well, I can't totally recommend it as of yet because of the issues with the rule book and potentially some of the artwork. What I can do is kind of partially recommend it, because if you can get past that, you're gonna have a really good experience playing this game. Okay, so thank you very much for joining me on this Not Board Gaming bite-sized episode for SSO, the Rage of Montalbano by Mannequin Games. As I say, there's certain things that I really like about it and other things that potentially need more development before it's really ready to go out there. So once again, thank you for joining me. My name's Mark. This is Not Board Gaming. Do remember you can join us on Facebook and on Instagram. That's Not Board Gaming, always BORED. Do remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out our other videos. And one final thought. If you can't find anybody else to play with, there's nothing wrong with playing with yourselves. Bye-bye.